I want to focus on the change, but I have one question because of your background. Is it economy a science?
Ah, gosh. I'm not entirely convinced that we need to worry as to whether it is or it isn't,
Okay.
because what's in a name? I think of all the social sciences and humanities, we are the one which is, ours is the one which is most evidence-based. And that's something which I think most of us in economics, no matter how theoretical you are, feel compelled to respect. So we sit between, a subject sits between the humanities and natural sciences. But having sat on it, in some sense, it makes it even more difficult because you have to absorb material from both sides.
Yeah.
If you work, for example, on, let's say, food development problems, then one of the first things you really should be studying is nutrition science. Because if you want to study poverty,
Yeah.
you need to understand what happens to a person when he doesn't eat enough. It's a huge, difficult natural science question, involving physiology, cognitive science, and so forth. And of course, you also want to ask what aspects of a human's well-being you want to focus on. So you bring in the humanities there. So we have to play on both sides.
I mean, economics is among the social science the one that is more quantitative. I mean, probably,
Yeah.
and we take very important decision and statement on those numbers that comes out from the economy. Don't you think that today we are sometimes too much confident in the numbers that comes from economics, not just in economics, but in the numbers that comes out?
Yeah, I agree with you completely in everything you've said. It is a quantitative subject. We deal with quantitative objects. We worry about how many miles of cable have you laid, how many tons of steel have you used, how many acres of land are you cultivating, how many square kilometers of forests have been cleared.
Yeah.
So these are all quantitative. So per force we have to.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then the question arises as to whether there are two things here. One is whether the models, the conceptual apparatus that the scientist, in my case the economist, is producing is encouraging people to collect the right sort of numbers. Right. So, for example, if you work on my kind of stuff, on environmental matters, you know that maybe GDP should not be used with that kind of confidence because it has some serious weakness. Then what you should be doing is to suggest some alternative. Meanwhile, historically, GDP, which was devised for a different purpose, has through time evolved into this huge specter. So we use it now for welfare, growth, development, progress of a country, and so you name it, and it's that. But it wasn't designed to do that. So there's one problem, which is you're looking at the wrong index for the question in hand. Then the other thing is, of course, because these numbers are going to be very approximate, because of the reasons you mentioned, goes without saying, it's fiendishly difficult to get the right numbers because many of these numbers are just not there. So you have to invent them. And when I say you, I mean the statistician who is doing the work out there in the field and so forth. But somehow, psychologically, no matter what subject it is, if you start seeing numbers, you start believing them. I think this is, I've come across this. It can be as spurious as you like, but if it's repeated over and over again, it becomes
also theoretical physics.
I think it's a part of human psychology. Must be something deep in this. So the two together is explosive.
Okay.
And I think these two kinds of errors.
Okay. Just a very small curiosity at this point. Do you think that the most important contributors that are going to come for economy, they will come from the social science from the hard sciences. I mean, psychology, sociology, and so on. They are going to become more quantitative and then to...
I see what you mean. I have very mixed feelings, and I can't speak with any serious conviction because it's too difficult a question. I don't know really the answer. In my own work, over the past 20 years, I've made very, very serious attempt at using the findings of biologists when I was working on nutrition science, of course the nutrition science people, and in the last 20 years with ecologists and environmental scientists. And without their collaboration, our models are pretty bad. The standard models that we use for making forecasts, for example, are devoid, national forecast, for example, are completely devoid of ecology and the environmental sciences. So, for example, the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change, now they take the advice of economists to make forecasts of, under business as usual and under different scenarios of carbon emissions, what the world will look like 50 years from now, 100 years from now, and so forth. And they're terrible. They're terrible not because they are approximate. We've agreed that that has to be the case. But they're terrible because they don't see any feedback from economic activity to nature, and then what nature will do in return to affect economic outlooks. So because the models don't have nature in them. Economic models almost invariably, other than in FEAM. FEAM has lots of nature in the economic models, I mean, if you look at their publications. But outside these models on the basis of which forecasts are made, there is no room for nature. So that feedback is not present. So I would say that if anything, we economists, I think, spend more time with the humanities people than we should. The subject came out of moral science, the humanities. In my own university 120 years ago, economics was taught in the moral science department. I mean, the philosophers and the economics was in the same department. And then in, I think, 1901 or something, it was taken away. And, people of the Enlightenment, people like David Hume, Adam Smith, were, of course, everything. They were Enlightenment people. So, in some sense, there is a draw that economists have towards the humanities. We read philosophers, we read, public intellectuals, and so forth. But increasingly, I've felt that I would like to see more
hard science,
because without them, we can't understand what's going on out there.
Yeah.